Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for tuning in to KSWV Radio, 99.9 FM, 810 a.m. It is our distinct honor and privilege to welcome to our program today Supreme Court Justice David K. Thomson. Good morning.
Good morning, Stefan. It's an honor to be with you today, and it's nice to see you as always.
It's good to see you too, Justice. And we just want to say thank you for the work that you and the other justices do on the court. So thank you so much. Now, Justice, one of the questions that I kind of want to ask you at the forefront is, we've been in a pandemic. How's the court been doing during this phase of our pandemic here?
Well, it's been a struggle, Stefan. I mean, I'm sure everybody can relate. It certainly doesn't compare to the personal struggles people have been going through with the sickness and loss of life. But this last year has been difficult since almost a year ago, right? The week before it, I was helping coach my daughter's elementary school basketball team, and next thing you know, we're shut down. But we are proud to say, through leadership and commitment of our judicial partners and employees, we never shut the courthouses. We kept the judiciary open in limited ways. A lot of the ways you and I are communicating today remotely, and some things we could not do remotely, like jury trials, which we'll talk about. But we did our very best to make sure the wheels of justice continued to turn. And now, hopefully, as we will discuss today, there are some silver linings coming out of that as we come out of hopefully the pandemic, and one of those will be the ability for greater access to what is going on in the court system and what happens at the New Mexico Supreme Court.
Absolutely. And if I could, if I may, before we begin our conversation, for our listening audience that may not be familiar with yourself and the role that the Supreme Court does, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. As for myself, and I'm honored to be here on Que Suave, a station that is renowned in Santa Fe, and with a family that's renowned in Santa Fe. I'm from Santa Fe. I was born and raised here, and I am a product of the Santa Fe Public Schools. I went to E.J. Martinez and CAPTCHA. I tell Esteban, I tell the students when I meet with them, I say, I know I'm getting old when all the schools I went to are getting torn down. So it's the old CAPTCHA. Mom taught it in Vargas. Santa Fe High is still there.
Exactly.
We'll see what happens next week, So that's why I have a particular affinity with this program. And so I grew up here. I came back. I was a trial court judge, a district court judge downtown here, the courthouse downtown. And the district is made up of Santa Fe, Rio Arriba, and Los Alamos. And I was a trial court judge for a while. And then I was lucky enough and fortunate enough for the governor to appoint me to the New Mexico Supreme Court. And I ran for office and was elected. The Supreme Court is the highest court in the system, Esteban. The Adams case, which maybe we'll talk about a little bit, started at the lowest court, which is a magistrate court. That is over on Galisteo Road. It goes from magistrate to district, and district is downtown. And then everybody gets a right to appeal a case, and that's a court of appeals. And if someone believes the court of appeals got it wrong, it comes to the New Mexico Supreme Court. And that's where I work, and that's where this case eventually ended up.
And that's where that's where the buck stops, so to say.
The buck stops here, and it's what I talk to the students about is, there's the United States Supreme Court, which gets a lot of attention, obviously, and well deserved with regard to the lifetime appointments and the important work that they do, and they interpret the United States Constitution. But New Mexico has its own constitution, and it's our job to interpret that, and we are in fact the final word on that. When in fact we decide a matter that is based on New Mexico law or the New Mexico Constitution, we are the final word. It does not go to the United States Supreme Court. So there's a lot of important work we do and all our judicial partners do across the state.
It's our distinct honor and privilege to be speaking with New Mexico Supreme Court Justice David Thomson. And I wanted to ask you, Justice Thomson, about this educational opportunity, this program that you put together here for students in New Mexico. Tell us what the goal is, what your vision was for the program, and how it's coming along.
Well, also, thank you, Stefan. Here's what the vision was. I literally was driving to work where our courthouse is located right downtown. It's kind of catty corner to Del Chado. It's next to the legislature. It's a beautiful old WPA courthouse. We're right next to the legislature, and the legislature's in session. And because of current events, we've seen this fence go around the legislature. And I saw that and I thought, I wonder how students are viewing this, how young people are viewing what has sort of occurred according to recent events. And it was troubling to me to see that, quite frankly. And I believe in, what I can do in direct action. And during my work as a trial court judge, as I was sharing with you, I would pick juries, and I'd pick 14 juries for a criminal case, for example, 12 and 2 alternates. And they would all come in a big group because you pick from a pool. And before they were picked, you could tell they were very reticent about serving. They heard about jury service. They thought it was an inconvenience. They thought it was a burden. And then they would serve as a jury, and you would talk with them afterwards. And almost uniformly, they would say, boy, I really valued that experience. I did not know this is the way courts operate. I appreciate the way courts make decisions, how they handle facts, how they apply things evenly. And so I thought, well, maybe the best way to explain at least what we do in our branch of government is to have them see it. And one of the benefits, I don't want to say benefits, the silver lining of the COVID situation is we're able to do this remotely. We're able to project out our oral arguments. So let's combine some civic education with this new technology. Let's make it available to the Santa Fe public schools and the Albuquerque public schools as sort of a pilot project. And the response was great. And I've met with a number of schools so far. And these kids, from second graders to, at Wood Gormley to Ortiz Middle School, they're bright and they're interested and they ask great questions. I've really enjoyed so far how it's gone.
So what is the curriculum like for the students when they walk in and log in online? And what is the curriculum like, and what is the course like? If you can kind of explain to us how what they see and what they learn.
Yeah, it took a little work. The interesting thing about writing, we write opinions eventually. Once we hear the case, it ends up, if you can see, these are real books, by the way. This isn't a fake background.
Wow.
That's where they end up. And it's very sort of complicated writing. And what, the challenge with presenting this to high school students is how can I take some of these complicated issues that may be, a little dry maybe, and communicate it in a way that makes it interesting. So I wrote up quite literally a little 3-page brief. And I said, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see the state's attorney on one side. You're going to see the public defender on the other. This is what the case is about. Here's a history of it. I went through the system like we talked about through the magistrate courts, how it ended up here. And then I said, look, here's some things we can talk about, some topic areas if you want to meet and have a conversation about it. Let's talk about some of the substantive issues, around search and seizure. Or let's talk about the broader issues about how we look at facts. How is a scientific fact dealt with in a court of law? How is it tested? And then I start every class with 2 things. One, I thank the teachers, right? I tell them, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but here's what I say. I say, if you ask me what I had for lunch last Wednesday, I don't recall. Or, dinner 2 days ago. I'll tell you who my second grade teacher is, and I'll tell you who my middle grade teacher is. I'll tell you about Bobby Rodriguez at Santa Fe High. I'll tell you about Miss Hoffman. I'll tell you about Mr. Trujillo in third grade at E.J. Martinez. That's the impression they have on me. So you thank the teachers, and then we talk a little bit about what the rule of law means. And in fact, now we're coming on, or we've just passed the anniversary of the march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery,
Yes.
Alabama, and the voting rights.
Yes.
Which and I have to say, I'm recent to that, understanding that history myself, and it's fascinating, and it's a wonderful lesson in the rule of law. And we talk about what John Lewis and those folks did in a civil way, understanding that their right to vote was passed the 15th Amendment some 100 years before, 90 years, 80 years before, and it still hadn't come to realization yet. They relied, and they had a firm enough belief in the rule of law that they could eventually prevail. And so we talk about that. And then I just open it up for conversation and ask there any questions they have.
I can imagine that there's probably a great deal of questions that might be asked about the vocabulary or what some of these words mean in the court system. Do you get questions like that?
Get a lot of questions about, in this particular case, there's a statute that's implicated, which is called the Implied Consent Act. And you say the Implied Consent Act, and people, they're like, okay, they'll almost immediately glaze over. Then you explain to them what does that act do? And I tell them, some of you may go and get a driver's license pretty soon. And do you understand, when you go and get the driver's license, the state of New Mexico has said, as a privilege and honor of driving on the streets and having a driver's license, you're going to consent in certain circumstances to a blood test and a breath alcohol test. It's a condition of you driving. And all of a sudden, their ears perk up. They're like, oh, I never knew that. That's interesting. And you talk about that. Well, how can the government do that? What is the basis for it? Would it be okay if in the Implied Consent Act they said, by the way, we're also going to search your phone? Is that too much or too little? And so when you put it in that sort of context, they really start to grab and grasp the basic concepts.
Now, some of the case study, I believe, that is being looked at as part of the educational program is State versus Adams. Is that the case? So we'll go ahead and put that up there for our viewers. But I wanted to ask, approximately how many students are participating or have participated in this program?
So the count now, I believe, and I'll have to check with someone that's helping me with that, we're at 9 schools, I think over 600 students.
Wow. That's amazing.
It's a lot.
Fantastic.
I mean, it's four classes at Santa Fe High.
Wow.
And Stefan, I couldn't have. I used to do this at I would say, come to Supreme Court. I've had Cub Scouts come. I invite anyone. I give them we give them a tour. I could never have brought 600 students through here. It's really been a remarkable response, and it got to a point where my colleagues are, helping me with these. But it's, I'm doing them about 2 a day for the next couple of weeks.
Wow.
And that's Santa Fe and Albuquerque. And eventually, I hope we do this on an annual basis. And it's Rule of Law Day. And we go to Las Cruces, we go to Farmington, we go to Hobbs. We have oral argument down in the gymnasium in Roswell or the federal court, and because the response has been great, and these kids have been really responsive.
Learning about the rule of law and the judicial system is such a good thing. And I can imagine that it could probably pique the curiosity of some of the students that are sitting in the class to say, one day I want to become a lawyer, or maybe I want to try to be a Supreme Court justice. Do you kind of see that the interest is getting piqued in some of the students here?
Yeah, I've spoken to 2 career academies. As a matter of fact, there's a wonderful group of students out of Albuquerque, a career academy there. And then Ortiz Middle School has an interesting program and I just spoke with them today, on kids that are really thinking about, and preparing for their career. And so a lot of the questions are really not on Adams, State versus Adams. They're not on some of the substantive issues. They ask, what did you have to do to become a lawyer? What did you have to do to become a judge or justice? And so I think, I hope that I've made that attractive and accessible. I also told a student today, she was very funny. I said, well, Miss Sandoval, I said, do you think you want to become a lawyer? And she said, to be honest with you, no. I said, hey, I get it.
Yeah. So the other side of the coin, it could be, hey, it piques the interest, or it could let them know, I don't even want to be that.
It's not something I want to do. Nice try, Thomson. You didn't convince me. But, all you can do is provide opportunity and knowledge, right? And I tell them, you pick your own path. And I will say, and let me say this too. When we talk with Santa Fe High, I think that's next week, Chief Justice Michael Vigil is going to speak with us, and he's from Santa Fe also. So, for those kids out there, hopefully they see, Justice Vigil and inspired on the, his career, and maybe that's something they're interested in. But I certainly understand people's dislike for attorneys, and maybe they don't want to do it.
Well, I am looking at the list here, and I want to say thank you to your staff for sending it over. But it looks like some of these Santa Fe public schools that we've seen are Ortiz Middle School, El Camino Real, Desert State Academy. Of course, you mentioned Santa Fe High School, Milagro Middle School, and Turquoise Trail Charter School. So these are some of the Santa Fe area schools that have been participating. And you had mentioned, of course, Albuquerque and other participating schools, over 600 students. Very successful program by all accounts. There's probably someone that's listening right now and says, man, I wish maybe my student, my child could go through something like that. Do you envision this continuing, being a repetitive course?
I do. Stefan, the idea came as I described, on this sort of, what can I do to have this limited conversation? But I really am inspired by it. I just, in this short amount of time, to reach this many students. And I will say, I thought initially, well, I'm going to appear on these, and it's going to be, let's hear Justice Thomson give a lecture. It'll fill some time for these kids. They've been unbelievably responsive. I have pages of questions. Sometimes they'll be able to watch the argument, and then they create a list of questions. I did with Gormley half an hour with second graders. That's about how much time you want to grab their attention. They're asking me, well, why do you have a jury?
Good point. Good question.
Yeah, and it's it.
These are great questions,
right? And I sit there and go, oh my goodness,
yeah,
that's a great question.
Absolutely.
And okay, so I do hope this is ongoing. I hope there's a way we can do it where once we're out of the pandemic and kids are back in school, that there's still a way to reach this many kids. But if someone's out there saying this is something I want to do, I will make myself available. I will put on my calendar as much as I can possibly hold to do these groups. So,
Justice Thomson, when we think of the Supreme Court, and I can think of many that I admired growing up as a kid here, and when you think of not only the New Mexico, but the country's Supreme Court, you think of justices that are way up there and sitting way up high, and and there's no way to be able to even talk with them or engage with them or interface with them, or you hope to God you're not even in front of them, because if you do, that means there's something, going wrong. This class is making it very approachable for people to engage with a Justice Thomson, and it's Thomson, and that's a great thing. And I just want to commend you for that, because you're giving people an opportunity to connect with a real live justice that maybe they otherwise wouldn't have that opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Stefan. I think you make an excellent point. It does not need to be that way. It does not need to be that way. And a big part of it is what you hit on, which is when I tell people what I do, they naturally recoil, right? Because they're like, this is the last person I would really want to see as a judge. And yep. then they say, well, they always end up with, I hope I never see you.
Yeah.
And I tell them, yeah, I hope you never see me either, because if you're at my level, you're really in trouble. Yeah. Like, I mean, if you hit to the point where we are, yeah, you've really got yourself in a bind. But really, one of the advantages of our state system, and as hard as it is to imagine, electing judges or whatever, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be able to communicate with people about what we do and, what role the judiciary plays, because it does impact them. It may not impact them directly, unless they're called as a juror, but it impacts them certainly in other ways. And so I think it's good. And I'll be very, very honest. With the first idea of streaming oral arguments in the New Mexico Supreme Court, I was not a fan of, because I thought, it's going to bring this circus atmosphere to it. People are going to be acting for the cameras. And I was wrong. I think now, understanding that more people have been able to view and see what we do, it is a good thing. And I think that's a point you make, and it's a good point.
I am thinking 10 years down the road, 15 years down the road, maybe 20 years down the road, and I'd like to reconnect with you and see if maybe you have someone that made their way through schooling and maybe eventually became one of your clerks,
I think that would be great. We've started another program I've started here is Minority Clerkship Program, where we look for minority and disadvantaged students at law schools in New Mexico and around New Mexico. We expose them as an extern in the New Mexico Supreme Court. So maybe they at some point would be interested in becoming judges and developing diversity in the judiciary. And you're right. Let's go back further. Let's reach into high school and start talking about, because, Stefan, my dad was a lawyer in Santa Fe, and he was a old sole practitioner. But I had the benefit of my father being in the profession. My mom taught school. I had benefits, right? Because I was exposed to that, and not everybody is. Mm-hmm. And I think if we can do that, maybe we can increase interest in it. And hopefully 10 years hopefully we'll talk before that.
Yeah, let's definitely make it a point for that.
We can see some of these kids from middle school. Maybe Miss Sandoval will change her mind. She'll go to law school.
Just for our listening audience out there that may not understand the role of a clerk, but it's a very prestigious role to have with the office of a Supreme Court justice.
Yeah. So what it's a unique part of our appellate situation is we bring students normally right out of law school, and they serve as law clerks, and it's for a term, a year or 2 years, and they learn about the judiciary and how to write. And one reason I'm a judge, I was a law clerk for Judge Black, who was from Santa Fe and was a federal judge, and taught me how to be a good judge and And I appreciate that, and I appreciate what I learn from my clerks every day.
Well, this is very encouraging, Justice, to see the work that's taking place, and you have, I think, opened up a door of opportunity that is unlike any other for students to learn firsthand from a justice on what it is that you do, what the judicial system does, and over 600 students, and possibly the opportunity to keep on going. That's a great thing. And again, we're talking with Justice David Thomson, and we're talking about this new educational program that he's teaching that helps students learn about the judicial system, helps teachers and to incorporate maybe the Supreme Court proceeding into their class schedule over the next several weeks. And learning all about what it is that you have been doing in this program has been really good. And we want to just ask you a couple of final thoughts for our listening audience before we end today.
Well, let me end where I started, Esteban, which is thanking you and thanking your family and telling you very much appreciate the role your family's played and the radio station played in the community of Santa Fe. And it is for me a community, and it is a community that is built on civility, an understanding of our history, an understanding of civics, and an understanding that we all benefit when we understand what our governmental institutions do and what the rule of law means. And that's all I was trying to communicate to these students. And the interesting thing is I went into it thinking this is what I want to do for the Santa Fe public schools and the Albuquerque public schools. And the reward on the other end has been amazing. I have more energy after these meetings with these kids than I did going in, because they really are inspiring in the questions they ask and the interest they play. So thank you for giving me this platform and the time to talk to you today.
Well, we thank you, Justice. Appreciate the work that you're doing, obviously on the bench there, but also with our future leaders and our students here that are going through the program. So all the best to you and everyone there at the court system, and to all of your families.
Pleasure to see you, so thank you.
Same here.